Guys, have you ever been axe throwing? That was a weird way to start the podcast, but I did that on Saturday for the first time in my life. They've got a few rooms here in Southern California. They call them break rooms, where they have axe throwing and smash air, like rage rooms, I call it, where you can just smash stuff. And apparently, this is not a motion that my body is used to performing, the act of flinging an axe towards a wooden wall. And I'm in a tremendous amount of pain. Oh, my Lord. I am a fragile, delicate flower of a man. Welcome to Old Man Squad, Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Bespris. They don't call me the Old Man Squad for nothing, ladies and germs. Thanks for tuning in here as we embark upon the final 2 weeks of the NBA season. We are officially now coming down the chute. Head-to-head viewers, you guys are probably done by now, so I thank you for continuing to tune in just for the hell of it. For the smell of it. Roto players, those of you that are going to the final day of the regular season, these shows are now going to be largely for you. I'm hoping that most head-to-head leagues are over by this point. I realize they might not be. We'll try to throw in some thoughts on schedule every once in a while, but it's not going to be a focal point here the rest of the way as we kind of wind things down. Quick note, I do shows all off-season long. So don't tune out just because things are wrapping up. We've got all sorts of stuff to talk about. It'll be your sort of daily break from whatever's going on in your life. Doesn't have to be a bad life. Could be a good life. You still get to take a break, hang out with us here at Old Man Squad during the off-season. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's talk about some of the ads, very closes, and other stuff from a weekend review. We're going to look, I looked at all 30 teams' most recent ball games and pulled out the players that I thought we should talk about on today's show. Let's dive into it. Starting at the top, Bogdanovic, name that popped up because this is basically a reminder that when Kawhi Leonard sits, Bogdanovic is still a very useful fantasy player. Kawhi set the front end of a back-to-back that went Sunday into today on Monday. Clippers are in Cleveland yesterday, in Orlando tonight. So Kawhi's going to play in this one. They have a Dallas back-to-back Friday and Saturday, so presumably Bogdanovic will be good in one of those two games. They also have a Spurs-Rockets back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, and Kawhi will probably sit those out as well. Also, bear in mind, if the Clippers know their seed, what their rank is going to be going into the postseason, you might also see Kawhi sit out one of the last couple of games in Sacramento or in Golden State. So there's a chance here potentially to get 2 or 3 good games out of Bogdanovic down the stretch. Keep an eye on him for that reason. I don't know why it took me this long to bring him up, and I feel, frankly, ashamed, but Delon Wright is playing 30 frickin' minutes a ball game right now because the Knicks are down 3 point guards. It took a lot in the Russian nesting doll that was the New York Knicks point guard spot. You had the big doll, that was Jalen Brunson, and then pop that sucker open, and then you had the medium doll, and that was Deuce McBride, and then pop that sucker open, and you got to the small doll, and you thought that was going to be the last doll. That was campaign, but then, guess what? You got to unscrew the little tiny one, and inside of that was like a little pill-sized doll, and it was Delon Wright, and nobody knew he was there because he was 4 dolls deep, but here he is, and he's put up pretty good numbers in 2 games in a row. Now, again, if any of the Knicks point guards come back, any of the 3 dolls, small, medium, or large, they will swallow up the tiny pill-sized Delon Wright doll. But in the interim, I threw him on a couple of roto teams just in case Delon gets to play another ball game. And the Knicks are off today, which sucks for Delon Wright. And I realize that, if you're making a move for today, it makes no sense. But if you get to tomorrow and we get the report that nobody's back for the Knicks still, well, they get a back-to-back going. You might even get a couple more out of Wright. And you guys know he's like a classic Old Man Squad kind of dude because he doesn't score at all. But he had 4 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, a 3-pointer on 3 out of 6 shooting in the Knicks win over the Blazers over the weekend. And that is a classic Old Man Squad kind of fantasy line. Speaking of old men, Dennis Schroder is cooking these days, for better or worse. The Pistons had half of their team ejected in their game over the weekend against the Timberwolves, but Schroder had 11 points and 11 assists, and there's a little bit of that Spencer Dinwiddie vibe to the Dennis Schroder fantasy game. So if I'm going to be bullish on Schroder, I guess I probably also need to be bullish on Dinwiddie, and we'll get to him in a little bit. But you got your assists stream. Although I would say that Schroder is a little bit more reliable in his free throw shooting, if perhaps Dinwiddie a little more reliable in three-pointers. I don't know. Take it or leave it. You got a point guard that's starting, that's putting big minutes up there. I probably prefer Schroder over Wright in a lot of formats right now. But again, a lot of what you're doing at this point in the season comes down to what categories you guys are hunting. By the way, shout out to all of you that won your leagues on Sunday. I had a number of you that were actually texting me, buddies that watch the show, longtime friends. Congrats. I hope that things have gone well for the rest of you. And that's the beauty of your head-to-head playoffs. If you had some bad injury luck in the regular season, we can stream our way to some victories in there. I threw Brandin Podziemski's on the name on the list. Again, it doesn't really need to be mentioned because we've been calling him an ad basically since he took the starting job in this Jimmy Butler iteration of the Warriors. But if for some reason people in your league have been completely out to lunch, he deserves to be on there as well. Jusuf Nurkic made the list, but there is he's an asterisk player because you need Mark Williams to be out. But Nurk is very much the easy to spot backup at this point. And Mark Williams played in New Orleans. The Hornets had a game in New Orleans. He played in the previous game. This was the front end of a back-to-back that he sat out. So presumably, I think we'll probably see Mark for the next one. Wait a minute. Let me triple check on that because he might have gotten ruled out for both games on this back-to-back. Wait a minute. Hold on, everybody. We don't know yet. Okay, that's what I thought. I was worried I missed a thing here on Monday morning because it's Cesar Chavez Day here in California, and so my schedule is a little bit wonky with one kid is in school and the other one is not. Anyway, he was ruled out for the foot. They didn't specifically say it was rest. I'm going to assume it was rest, so probably you don't want to go Nurk for this one. And if you're looking at back-to-back, Charlotte's does have one more next week, so just keep that in mind if you want to squeeze a Jusuf Nurkic game out first thing next week. Hey, March Madness, we are to the Final Four, ladies and gentlemen, and lucky for you, BetOnline still has you covered as the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on March Madness. Even if your bracket went bust, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action, including live betting on every remaining tournament game. There aren't that many left, I guess. But at this point, BetOnline has the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball that we just talked about to the NBA, which we talk about every day. Baseball is in full swing now. NHL, MMA. BetOnline continues to be that number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline. The game starts here. Next name on our list is Kelly Olynyk. You guys know I love me some Kelly Olynyk. I don't even care if his minutes get limited sometimes. He puts up so much when he's on the floor. And right now, he's in a higher usage posture because a lot of the usuals are cooked, finally, for the New Orleans Pelicans. It's time for them to race to the bottom. Pels only have 7 games left, so they're one of the teams that has the lower number of remaining contests. A lot of teams still have 8. I think some might even have 9. No, mostly 8s. You might see the usuals get back in there this week. They play the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Bucks, so it's an opportunity to lose with your best hand. Next week, they've got the Nets, and then you're so close to the end of the season at that point that you've got to assume that the regulars are going to get rested. And at that point, I actually don't know what's going to happen with Olynyk. He might be sort of rolled up in that, but for the moment, I think he deserves to be rostered. For the moment, I say. For the moment. Adem Bona has to be on rosters right now. It is Bona season in Philadelphia. I don't care how bad they look. He's playing, and that's all that matters right now. Bona played 27 minutes in their last ball game. I think he had 29 or 30 in the one before that. 14 points, 8 boards, a steal, and 5 blocks. Yeah, he had 5 turnovers, but who cares? That's a monster of a center fantasy line. And nobody's really coming for it because he played center and they shifted Gershon Yabusele down to power forward in the last one. The Sixers are doing the right thing right now, as sad as it is, and that is losing hard. You must lose every ball game right now because their pick is top 6 protected, and they managed to now push to the 5th, I believe, worst record in the NBA. That's a big win for them. That doesn't guarantee that they're going to keep their pick, but it makes it a whole hell of a lot more likely than if they were 6th or 7th worst. So every little loss is critical for the Sixers right now. They are 2 losses away from being worse than the Pelicans, who did win their last ball game. I think it's going to be pretty hard to lose 2 more games than the Pels over just 2 weeks, but anything's possible. And I think if you're the Sixers, you want to make sure that you lose every remaining game. If they get to 24 wins, it's a huge, huge failure this year. So they got to go. What the hell are they at now? 9 games left? No. 7 games left. Oh, yeah, that's going to be a tough call. I think they're going to lose all 7, but I also don't know that the Pels are going to win 2 more than them. But it's so important for the Sixers to lose. And frankly, the best way to do that is to not play anybody of any value. So get Bona in there. He looks great right now. Silly season devastation. I know that Justin Edwards was not very good in this last ball game from an efficiency standpoint, but he's out there and he's just firing away. And he also deserves to be on rosters while we're talking about guys from the Sixers that I think must be rostered right now. Keon Ellis I put on this list with a question mark because the Kings got absolutely spanked in their last ball game. And it made it a little bit of a tough one to handicap because Ellis was still starting, but they got beat down so hard that it was kind of difficult to know whether Malik Monk was about to overtake him. The Kings are a game and a half up on the Suns, who lost Kevin Durant in their last one, for the final play-in spot, which, by the way, I know we didn't get to do the full 5-episode season win total show, but I was pretty hard on the under for Sacramento because it kind of felt like they had topped out a little bit season or 2 past. I didn't think it was going to be this bad, though. Yeesh. Woof. They're still fighting, though. Their play-in spot is not locked up, and anything can happen once you get into the play-in tournament. Although, even if they get out of it, their best-case scenario is playing the Rockets or the Thunder, or can they even get to that spot from the 10 seed? 10 plays the 9, and then the winner of that plays the loser of 7-8. No, the Thunder would be the worst-case scenario for them, and to go through the play-in again in my head. But whatever. I mean, at this point, they might as well. So they're going to go with whatever they think gives them the best shot to win. I don't know what they think that is right now. I'm leaving Keon Ellis on my teams until we find out if he's going to keep his starting job. That's the short version. Kai Jones should stay on rosters for now, but the Mavericks are a discussion point all their own. So we're going to come back to Kai Jones, and we're going to come back to the Mavericks in a little bit. But although we can talk about Spencer Dinwiddie still being good enough right now, I thought maybe his role might fall off with Anthony Davis playing. But Dinwiddie still had 14 and 11, a nice double-double. And it seems like they're going to let him be the creator. It helps Dinwiddie, obviously, that Brandon Williams got hurt again. And Max Christie, they're not going to force feed him minutes. But I have thoughts on the big men stuff going on in Dallas. So we'll loop back around to that. For now, Spencer Dinwiddie does belong on rosters, and we can go ahead and push forward with that. Kevin Huerter has been good for Chicago. I see no reason to take him off of our ads board. I think Rui Hachimura is going to continually do more and more, kind of little bits at a time here. But like thinking back to the Saturday game, with a minute total on Rui in that one. Still at 28.5. They haven't pushed him up into the 30s yet, but they will. And his role is slowly increasing as he gets his legs underneath him. They just feel better about what they can do offensively when Hachimura is in there. And you've also seen the sort of phase out of Jackson Hayes as well. Oh, and the last name on the board that I almost forgot to bring up, is Kyle Filipowski, because Walker Kessler is now being the kid gloved a little bit more. He missed a game against Denver with an illness. I don't know exactly the severity of it. Utah is in a good place in that they only have 16 wins. I think, do they have 59 losses? Yeah, they have one more loss than the Wizards already. So those two teams feel pretty well locked into the two worst records, but there is an advantage to being the single worst team. So we'll see. Playing Kessler hasn't really changed their win-loss fortunes all that much here down the stretch. They have Charlotte today, which is why they're definitely not going to play their guys. But then they'll lose in Houston on Wednesday just fine. And they'll lose in Indy on Friday, and Atlanta's a little bit of a toss-up. Portland next week, you might see Kessler get that one off. OKC, Minnesota, depending on who's playing in those games. But I think you'll probably get Kessler at least the next two after this one. But with him out today, Kyle Filipowski is a very easy decision to play here on Monday night. Let's scroll on to the very close board. And again, this is a pretty long list because we went through everybody over the weekend. Moses Moody is on my very close board. He's been bad for a while. And I know I said there was basically no reason to have him on your roster, but there's a chance that he starts to warm back up again. I think he'd missed something like 12 or 13 consecutive three-pointers over 3 or 4 games. I could look up the number, but I don't think that it's super consequential for our discussion. He made 3 in this game at San Antonio. And I know the Spurs don't play any defense, fully aware that that's part of it. But if Moody warms up again and he's the guy that's going to get the first crack at the minutes, which he did, don't look at the minute total from this game. The Warriors won by 40 points, so nobody played. And Jonathan Kuminga went out early with some ankle soreness. I don't know if that's going to linger at all. But any of those little things is obviously helpful for Moody, who, if he gets hot, becomes a really good source of threes and steals again, which he had not been because he couldn't throw a stone in the ocean for the last 2 weeks in a row. I put Zaccharie Risacher on this board, and I'm fully aware that he's going to be heavily rostered because he's scoring a lot, but you know me. Scoring is not my thing. Risacher's been putting up really nice point total numbers outside of his previous ball game. He had 36 in his last one, but he only scored 5 in the one before that. But I think he had a double digits 6 or 7 games in a row. Yeah, 15, 16, 21, 14, 22, 18. Nice three-pointers for Risacher. The field goal percent had been pretty good over that stretch. But if you look at his averages over the last 14 days, he's still sitting outside the top 120 because his free throw numbers are bad. He doesn't get any steals or blocks or rebounds or assists. So even with a good field goal percent run, it's really hard for him to get inside the top 100. You kind of have to be hard charging threes and points and then praying that the field goal percent doesn't fall back off again, which, by the way, it probably will, but I don't know, may or may not happen in the last 2 weeks. And that's why he's only on the very close list for me. Kevin Porter Jr. is on the close list. That's mostly for points leagues. He had a nice 28-point, 4-board, 5-assist game, bouncing back from arguably the worst fantasy line I've seen all year and the one before that. I'm not putting him on a 9-category team, but if you're streaming for basically counting stats, that's where he probably makes some sense, and that's what pretty much a points league is. Gary Trent is also on the same very close list. He's mostly a threes and steals streamer, but he's getting close to 30 minutes with Dame out for the rest of, we assume, the regular season. And so that's why those two guys are there. Pivoting back to the Pelicans for a couple of guys that are very, very close in my eyes. One of them is Bruce Brown, who shot the ball terribly. He went 1 for 8, but he had 12 boards, 2 assists, a steal, and 3 blocks in his last ball game, and has kind of quietly here been pretty good for about 2 weeks in a row, minus, again, the percentages. Over the last week, though, the free throw percent has kind of course corrected, even if the field goal hasn't. And he's at 11 points, 9.5 boards, 1.5 assists, a steal and a half, 2.5 blocks. It's a crazy number. And it's got him ranked inside the top 50. But also, we know 4 defensive stats a game is not going to stick. 10 rebounds is not going to stick. The field goal percent will get better, but that gets better, probably a smaller impact than the other stuff getting worse. Where does that land him? I'm not really sure. But if you need that kind of some stuff across the board sort of fantasy line from a shooting guard, small forward eligible player. Bruce Brown could be that guy. His teammate, Jose Alvarado, is also on my extremely close list. He's been starting at point guard, and the minutes have been solid, but he's been cold as ice since taking over that starting job for Trey Murphy. And I know that Alvarado is a bad field goal percent guy, but this is rough even by his standards. Over the last 2 weeks, Jose is shooting 30% from the field on 10 shots per game. That's enough to pretty much sink your team, and that's a very difficult thing to pop into your lineup unless you're punting field goal. And over the last week, he's at 28%, so it's actually been worse somehow, which has him ranked outside the top 300 because he's been like the ultimate punt field goal guy. But if you look at his other stuff, minus turnovers, it's actually not that bad. He's at 10 points, 4 boards, 5 assists, almost 2 steals a game. The problem, of course, is 3.7 turnovers and 27.5% from the field. That's just untenably bad, sinking you unless you're punting those two things. But he's still an NBA caliber player. And we know that if you look at the career numbers, he'll probably get back up closer to 40%. He's 41 for his career from the field. Those turnover numbers are obscene because he's running point, but that's not going to stick. Even when he's had this type of gig before, he's not up around 4 to 5 turnovers. So I like Alvarado. He's still on some of my rosters, but I also totally understand that you can't start him right now because he's been that bad in a few key categories. Man, it's been bad. Karlo Matkovic is also on my list. This one is a little bit more dependent on who's in and who's out, because he's still only playing about 23, 24 minutes. But if we can get him up to 26 or more, then I would drop Matkovic into my rosters pretty easily. He's just not quite there yet. Lonnie Walker is back on the list here. He's a very close guy for me. He put up 23 points in 33 minutes in his last ball game. Some of that was because Quentin Grimes was out. I think they prefer him to be more of a bench gunner, but he's not shy. So, even when Grimes is in, we still saw Walker kind of ramping up in what he was comfortable doing out there. He played 21 minutes and took 9 shots in the previous game. That was, again, kind of getting his legs back underneath him. I don't think it's going to be this good most days, but who knows? I added him on a bunch of leagues just to sort of see what happens next. Because if he does suddenly start playing starters minutes like he did before the concussion back in the beginning of March, and he was taking 13 to 18 shots a game, he was scoring a lot in there. He was a focal point. Klay Thompson is on my very close board. I think ultimately he probably settles just outside the top 100, but he's also a very good source of threes. So do with that what you will. Manas Buzelis has been a hot as hell lately. I got to give credit where credit's due. He has really kicked it into high gear, and it kind of felt like that Lakers game was the one that did it. In LA, he was all over the map before that one. He played 30 minutes, had 31 points. And since then, he had 10 points, a steal, and 2 blocks, 12 points, 7 boards. And in his last game, a loss against Dallas, he had 28, 9, and 6 with 5 3-pointers and a block. He is running extraordinarily hot right now. I am fully aware that 50% from the field and 88 from the free throw line, probably not sustainable numbers. So, whatever. That's got him at top 80. And so if any of that peters out, he falls back outside the top 100. But he is murdering people right now, and that probably needs to be on rosters until he cools off, at which point you probably then pull the plug on it. So just be aware. It might not last the remaining 2 weeks, but, it also might. Zach Edey is on my very close board, and you guys might be wondering why, and I think it's because of the coaching change and the return of Ja Morant. There was kind of 2 things going on with the Grizzlies. Yeah, they lost to the Lakers. That's a competitive ball game. That's not like a bad loss or anything. The Lakers are a hell of an offensive team when they get it going. But Edey had 14 and 11 with a steal and 3 blocks. He missed his free throws, which is actually kind of unusual. He's not a bad free throw shooter. He's going to be a good field goal guy. And he's so gigantic that there are a bunch of teams out there that just don't know what the hell to do with him when he gets close to the rim. Their next one against Boston might be a little tougher. Boston has a little more size than the Lakers do. And like Miami in there has some size. But with Ja Morant back, and the Grizzlies being more willing to run pick and roll than they were before, because they, again, kind of gutted things. They had largely moved away from a pick and roll offense this year, which I didn't realize until recently, kind of doing a little bit more digging on it and reading through some stuff that I saw on X. Can't call it that, on Twitter. If pick and roll becomes a larger part of things, Edey's going to be a beneficiary of that. It's kind of the Ivica Zubac phenomenon of this year. Now, Zubac is a better offensive player, just a more well-rounded NBA player than Edey by a long shot. But a lot of what's happened with Zoo this year is that the Clippers have James Harden running pick and roll all the time. And so he's just involved in the action. And if that's what's happening now in Memphis, I don't think we're going to want to miss Zach Edey's part of it kind of thing. He's pretty heavily rostered considering he hasn't been very good for most of the year, but kick the tires, see if he's out there in your league. His teammate I've downgraded. I know that if you're seeing this show independent of any other shows we've done, you'll see Santi Aldama on the very close board and think, oh, Dan likes Santi Aldama. He has him very close. But if you watch previous shows, you'll know that I had Aldama on the ads board, and he's not there for me anymore. I think he's becoming like the Grizzlies version of Jusuf Nurkic, where he's going to put up fantasy numbers when he's in there, but I'm not sure his teammates like him very much. It seems like they're annoyed. There was a little scrum and a timeout a couple games back between Aldama and Desmond Bane. They don't like his defensive effort right now, and now there's a coaching change, and so nothing is safe. So this is actually a downgrade for me on Aldama. Cason Wallace is on the very close board. The Thunder are mostly healthy again right now, so I'm not going to add him. I liked him when Jalen Williams was out, but Williams is back. And then Peyton Watson, who's been coming on these days, and seems like he's just sort of like part of what the Nuggets are doing. I don't, there's guys in, there's guys out for Denver seemingly daily. And like this last one, I believe Jamal Murray was the guy that was out in the Nuggets' most recent ball game. That was back on Friday, right? Weren't they off over the weekend? Am I remembering that right? Yeah, Nuggets didn't play Saturday or Sunday. So Jamal Murray was out, but Russ didn't get the start. Peyton Watson did. And he's been playing more kind of regardless these days. When Aaron Gordon's out, Peyton Watson's the guy that's dropped in. And he's finally kind of doing the stuff that we thought he was going to do the last time he had a shot on a bigger role in whatever it is that the Nuggets are doing. And we're like 7 games into a pretty good Peyton Watson run. He is an extraordinary shot-blocking small forward for fantasy. So if you need a shot-blocking boost and you don't want to have to do it out of the center spot, Peyton Watson is a terrific player to throw into that. I mean, he's blocking the crap out of shots these days. He has 10 in his last 3 ball games. And again, he's small forward eligible. That's pretty good. He's going to have a high field goal percent because Nuggets offense. I wouldn't count on him for a ton of scoring or threes. He'll add a little bit of that here and there. 4, 5, 6 rebounds, a couple of assists. But again, you're mostly hunting defensive stats from a wing player, which has him at the very close board for me. Because not everybody is going to need a shot blocking small forward who has free throw issues and doesn't shoot the 3 ball. But a lot of you might. Let's keep going to the watch list, and we'll move through these names a little bit quicker because I don't think they're all that ultra close, except for one chunk of names here, and that is the Dallas Mavericks, because Dereck Lively II and Daniel Gafford have each been upgraded to questionable. We may get a Mavericks big men return fest going on. Possibly as early as tonight. They're hosting the Brooklyn Nets, and I don't know if they're going to be back for this ball game. Obviously, you stay tuned to the news. Underdog NBA has the fastest feed on the interwebs if you want to see what's happening as quick as humanly possible. I would trust Daniel Gafford more between these two guys, just because we've seen him put up fantasy stats in lower minutes than Lively. This is probably the time to go out and see if Gafford might have been dropped in one of your leagues. Of course, their return would also mean that Kai Jones is no longer worth rostering. So keep an eye on all of that. Brandon Williams is also on the watch list. He might miss the rest of the year with an injury. Just keep one eye on him. Julian Champagnie out of San Antonio. They got spanked in their last one, so the minutes were a little weird. If his minutes ever trend back up into the high 20s, I would add Champagnie. Ryan Rollins is also on the watch board for Milwaukee. Again, they're trying to figure out how the hell to pick up the pieces here with no Dame and, frankly, not a ton of depth. And Rollins has shown himself to be a decent assists and steals guy, but also super inconsistent. KJ Simpson is on the watch list for Charlotte with LaMelo Ball back out for the year again. LaMelo Ball. What a pain in the ass he's been for seasons upon seasons here. Simpson played 35 minutes in Charlotte's loss at New Orleans. He had 9 points, 3 boards, 4 assists, and 2 steals. If you are picking him up, you are doing so probably for the games where Mark Williams is starting, because then Simpson is going to be a point guard type of dude. He'll maybe give the ball to a big man who can score it. In this one, they actually ran a lot of offense through a Nurkic high post type of deal, which helped minimize turnovers a little bit. I don't think that Simpson's going to maintain fantasy value, but again, there is some streamability there. Jared Butler is on the watch list. I can't quite elevate him because every time it looks like he's going to be good for a couple of days, he then is not. The right way to phrase it. But his last game was good. He had 15 points, 6 assists, couple of steals, and 3 threes. The percentages were better. He's had these games mixed in where the turnovers have been awful and the percentages have been awful. And so he's, again, kind of a tough guy to stream, but like a few assists. I just think they're better assist guys right now that we already talked about on the ads board. Colby Jones, Justin Champagnie, and AJ Johnson are, again, all rolled into one kind of package deal for the Washington Wizards. I don't know what the hell the Wizards are doing on a game-to-game basis. I do think, and I forgot to put him on this list, I do think Tristan Vukcevic does belong on rosters in non-back-to-back scenarios, because in 24 minutes, he's shown himself to be fantasy startable. But Colby Jones had 20 in this one. Justin Champagnie only played 17 minutes, but he has a great fantasy game if he can get up into the mid-20s in minutes. And then A.J. Johnson had 20 points also, but I have almost no trust in his fantasy game, despite the fact that he played 42 damn minutes. Anybody playing 42 minutes belongs on a fantasy roster. I just, like, this game, Brooklyn, Washington, in full hard tank mode, was one of the worst games to try to handicap ever. And I have almost no confidence running you guys out there and telling you who to pick up from these two teams, because it could be completely different in the next ball game. And sadly, to end the program, you have permission to drop my good buddy, Kevin Durant, who badly turned an ankle. He is not accompanying the Suns to at least start their 3-game road trip. That takes you to the last week of the regular season. The Suns may be mathematically eliminated by them, which is just absolutely devastating, considering their road trip takes them through Milwaukee, Boston, and New York. Then they've got the Warriors and the Thunder when they come back home. Phoenix doesn't stand a chance. Mate, what are they going to do? What's the best case scenario in those 5 games? 1-4 without KD? I don't think he's coming back this season. And for the Suns, they easily win the award for most disappointing team of the year. KD at least made it through 62 ball games, so it turns out to be an okay fantasy season for him. Devin Booker is going to be relied upon a lot. And I don't know, maybe Bradley Beal shows up. Apparently he's progressed to 5-on-5, but he's not ready to go yet either. So unfortunately, you can probably move on from KD. And that sucks, but you know what? He made it through your head-to-head playoffs, and that's probably what matters the most. And that's our program here. That's the big weekend review. How many names did we just cover? That was a lot of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14. That's 20, 28, 30, 39 names. Good one. Probably should have done that counting before we went on air. Subscribe, please, if you guys are, again, just kind of finding us here at the end of the regular season. You're looking for that last little advantage in your league. If you are already a subscriber, please stay, because we do shows all off season long. And as I've mentioned before, we have some very, very big news about what's going on here with Old Man Squad, specifically the YouTube channel through the offseason and then powering out into the future. And if you'd like to see that really big news, we are going to be dropping part of it over on Twitter today. Again, that's at Dan Besbris and at Old Man Squad. Both of those on Twitter are where you want to follow to see what the big news drop is. And then we'll be telling you about it here on the podcast at some point later this week as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like, rate, subscribe on your way out. I'm Dan Besbris for Old Man Squad. I'll see you guys in a little bit.